Is the head geologist with McGowan Working Group. Charles, we unfortunately got the news. Or I say unfortunately. I don't want to opine on this. I'm going to lean on your expertise. But my thought is we unfortunately got the news that Saudi Arabia is going to cut back oil exports by 1 million barrels per day. And if I'm doing 2 plus 2 and I think it equals 4, then my guess is that gas gets more expensive as the summer goes along. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate that. Yeah, you're correct, and we're just now entering the driving season, so we'll have peak gasoline demand, which of course will have upward pressure on prices. And as you mentioned, OPEC met this a few days ago, and they decided as a group to hold steady the cuts that they had put in place back in March, which caused a spike in oil prices through April. However, Saudi Arabia has decided unilaterally to take 1 million barrels a day of production, additional barrels off the market by reducing their own production from 10 to about 9 million barrels per day in July.
So we talk about energy independence, and I don't know how real that actually is, but it certainly is a buzz phrase. But isn't the fact that the global energy market is connected, is the idea of the United States, like, why can we not just get away from Saudi Arabian oil? Is there just not the political will to do that, or is it actually not feasible?
Well, we've actually, when you look historically, we are at a relatively low volume of imports. Currently, the United States produces a little over 12 million barrels per day. Production peaked in 2019 at about 13 million barrels per day, but has declined since then. Of course, we've had COVID and quite a bit of volatility in the market. But that's crude oil production of 12 million barrels. There's an additional 6 or 7 million barrels per day of natural gas liquids, fuel oils, refinery byproducts. Our consumption here domestically, though, is a little over 20 million barrels per day. So we've got somewhere around 2 to 3 million barrels per day of import volume in the market currently. So energy independence
Does the capacity
is possible.
exist?
It does.
Okay. Does the capacity exist for us to support ourselves if we needed to, and we had an administration or a political entity that was in place that had allowed it to exist?
Yes. As one part of the question, if you had a more regulatory friendly administration that was more willing to grant permits, at least on federal lands, and I want to point out that the federal lands contribute a relatively small portion of domestic production. It's more of a psychological effect when you just say you're anti-fossil fuel, as this administration seems to indicate. But energy independence is possible with the right price regime. As I said, we're close to, we're only importing 2 or 3 million barrels per day of foreign oil right now. We actually are exporting oil still, which was not allowed until just a few years ago. As recently as 2005 or 6, our oil production domestically had gotten below 5 million barrels per day. But advances in horizontal drilling techniques and completion technologies, including multi-stage sand frac jobs, have unlocked quite a bit of potential oil production in the shale. This comes with a huge rate of decline on the order of 50 to 60% first year. You've lost 80% of your initial production in 2 years.
So that's what I wanted to ask you next. So if I ask the question about energy independence, can it happen? Yes. So capacity would be the first question, and then the second question would be about sustainability.
True. there are environmental concerns that are voiced at every turn with new ideas for oil and gas projects.
Go figure.
Well, the safest, most environmentally friendly way to transport oil to the refineries from the many places it's produced is through pipelines. But pipelines have got a very bad name in the environmental world. So that oil will get to the refinery one way or another. And typically it's on rail cars by train and less frequently by truck. And you've seen with the derailments. Go ahead. You've seen the train derailments. I just wanted to
reintroduce you. Yeah, especially the one in India that was just so horrible over the weekend. He's the head geologist at McGowan Working Group and helping us understand what's going on with the announcement that Saudi Arabia is cutting back oil production. Look, I know this could be a really, really long conversation, so I'm looking for like the elevator pitch answer here. What is the biggest pushback to pipeline growth? Because it does feel like a safer and more is it just because it would have to go across federally protected lands and people just can't get beyond that? Because it feels like in the long term for environmental friendliness, that should be better than massive spills that are a result of train car derailments or shipping spills or whatever the case may be.
Well, no, you're correct. I think that most of these pipelines that are planned come from Canada, which is a pretty big source of imported oil. Right. For the United States. It's a relatively secure source. However, it does go through environmentally sensitive areas. It involves, a lot of digging and earth moving and pipes below and above ground. So there's potential for leakage and spills anywhere that you have transported petroleum. But I would put it to you that it's much riskier to take that through populated areas, as you saw in Ohio, where with the train derailment of refined products that created an extremely hazardous situation.
Yeah, it's rough stuff. All right, so let's pull it back to Mississippi as we bring this conversation to a close. And you said we're entering the busiest driving season of the year. People taking vacations, got breaks from school, and so on the road more. Traditionally, the price of gasoline goes up in the summer. So what kind of pain at the pump are we looking at with this news from Saudi Arabia that they're going to take 1 million barrels a day offline?
Well, I think that you'll see upward pressure. That's my opinion. Of course, I'm just a geologist, not an economist. But the fact is that there's 1 million barrels.
I'm just a radio host.
There's 1 million barrels coming off the market, which will have some psychological effect. Of course, the price of oil is set in New York on the NYMEX. The traders take all of these news reports into account, and they're on the floor buying and selling. But lack of supply and demand continues to increase, albeit at a slower pace than it had been. Of course, there's some concerns about the recession and this government debt ceiling debate that's been going on, which has put downward pressure on oil from about $80 back in March down to the upper 60s. And we've climbed back to about $72 or $3 as we speak this morning. There are a number of wells that are called DUCs, drilled uncompleted wells. And as recently as a year or two ago, there were about 7,500. We've worked that inventory down to about 4,600, a little under 5,000. Seen a little increase in the last few months of that inventory. It's gone the other way because many of these natural gas basins that have new wells are deferring completion because natural gas prices since last fall and summer have dropped from $8 per 1,000 cubic feet down to just a little over $2. And it's hard in any business to work through a 75% decrease in your product price. So that's natural gas, not the gasoline that goes in your car. We have a lot of decline. We have capacity to replace that 1 million barrels over some time, but you realize that nothing happens overnight in the oil business. It's months and months to put a conventional well on. When you're offshore, you're talking many, many months and even years from concept to production.
Although I would push back on one thing. I think there's one thing that happens fast in the oil business, and that's the price at the pump. It always seems to go up fast. Doesn't usually come down quite as quickly.
You are right.
But they have somehow figured out how to make that price go up in almost real time. Charles, thank you so much for your time, for your insight. Obviously a wealth of knowledge there. Great catching up with you this morning, and hope we can chat in the future.
Glad to be with you, Richard. Thank you very much.